So now let's start looking at some techniques you can use to resolve focus and motivation issues. If you remember from before, focus and motivation issues are typically going to manifest in the short term. So what are these focus issues and also the motivation issues? They sort of come hand in hand. The two main ones, or at least if you think about your focus and motivation issues, these are probably offshoots or mutations of what actually is affecting you. One of them is you can start, but you can't finish. There's always something else coming up. And the other one is you can start, maybe you can even finish a task, but in order to do it, you get distracted 10 or 12 times, and something that should have taken you an hour actually took 2 or 3. I want you to first think about whether there is an external, an internal, or a task-based distraction. What is causing you to lose your focus or your motivation? An external distraction is something in your environment that you can maybe fix, but keep in mind that sometimes you can't really choose where you work. An internal distraction is something that is very, very difficult to fix and sometimes might require your attention. So this is something we're not going to be focusing too much on. So as an example, if you're really concerned about what the test from the doctor is going to say, you're going to have a lot of trouble focusing on writing that expense report. Maybe you need to go and prioritize your life-work balance and you need to solve that problem first. But sometimes it is something we can change. For example, it might just be the task is really boring. In my own job, I have to mark a lot of student work. Marking is boring, and I have to keep myself motivated to do those marking while I am still sitting there saying, but the entire internet is right beside me. I can just play on that. And so I need to make sure that I deal with that task-based distraction. Here's a first tip. Let's say we do have an external distraction. Well, in theory, we could just remove it. How you do that is going to depend on what the distraction is, which we'll talk about in the next slide. Pros for this, well, there's less to get into your way and your workspace will be a place to focus. If you have a particular workspace, especially if you have your own office and you're able to move things around and set it up like you need, this is a really good technique for making sure that you don't accidentally distract yourself with the environment you're setting up. Now the cons are, well, this is not always possible. Sometimes you don't have your own workspace. Maybe you're working at a shared desk. Maybe it's not really your office, or maybe you have a lot of people around you, especially if you're a student studying online and you have your family in your house. It's also not always desirable, so it might be very expensive to remove a distraction, or it might be practically impossible. As an example here, imagine you're working in a building where there's really loud construction going on. Well, what are you going to do? Are you going to move your entire office just because someone's using a jackhammer an hour a day? Some pitfalls that I want you to consider are that it's really easy to spend the whole day organizing your desk or something like that. It's also very difficult sometimes to keep it simple. So if you're distracted by the radio, turn the radio off. Don't try to get noise canceling headphones that are thousands of dollars. Here are some tips for how to do that. The best thing you can do is identify what is it that is distracting you the most. For me, it's sounds. If a radio is going on in the background or there's a conversation, I have a lot of trouble focusing on things like writing a document or just reading something. And then come up with multiple ways to remove the distraction. So if there's a radio, well, maybe I can turn the radio off. If other people want to listen to the radio, maybe I do need some noise canceling headphones. Maybe I need to turn on my own music or my own white noise machine, or maybe I need to ask people to turn the radio down. If I have multiple ways for doing it, then I can use the one that is most effective for the environment I'm currently in, keeping in mind the fact that there might be other people around. Well, tip number 2, why don't you just remove yourself? If you can do that, that's fantastic. So let's say that you're working at the kitchen table and there's a lot of stuff going on. Someone's coming in with groceries and there's a dog barking outside and everything else. Well, can you move to a place that you can work? Now, it's not always possible. Again, this might not be your office. It might not be the other place that you can work. And sometimes it's not up to you. Maybe you have to be at a particular desk and you're having trouble with that. It also might be costly, so if you do have the capacity to move yourself, well, do you have to rent a whole office? Do you have to move your entire company? So you may have to think about the cons to this. And the pitfalls, well, looking for the perfect space, that's its own task, and it's its own distracting task as well. So be careful. If you're spending 10 hours looking for the perfect place to work and only working for an hour, then you've really wasted a lot of time. A technique a lot of people use is called the Pomodoro method, and it comes from a timer, actually. Someone who started the method had a timer that looked like a tomato, which is Pomodoro in Italian, and he used that timer to get himself to be more productive in the short term. So how it works is as follows. You set up dedicated work and break alternating periods. Usually it's between 20 and 25 minutes of work and then about 5 minutes of break, and some methods also suggest that you put in another 20-minute long break after every 3 work periods. Whatever works for you. One of the biggest pros of Pomodoro for people who use it and swear by it is that it is really easy to tell yourself you just need to focus for 20 minutes. There's a lot of free apps that are available. There's some online stuff you can use as well. They can do all the timing for you. And it helps a lot if you keep on moving between tasks. So if you sit down and you have a lot of trouble focusing on one task for a particular amount of time, the Pomodoro method is very, very helpful. The cons are that you still need to focus for 20 minutes. So if you're having trouble focusing for 20 minutes anyway, then just having a timer on in the background isn't really going to help you. Another pitfall that you might achieve is that switching constantly from on to off to on to off, that's its own distraction. Some people, once they get really into the groove, they don't want to stop what they're doing, and the Pomodoro method sort of interrupts you and says, hey, you need to stop now, you need to stop now. So I recommend trying it, but if it doesn't work for you, that's okay. For people that it works for, it's great. But if it doesn't work for you, don't worry about it. Here are some tips. This method works the best when you personally get distracted very quickly. So I want you to think about setting the timer to something that is reasonable for both the work and the break. And what reasonable means is going to be up to you. It's going to be up to the task. And honestly, if you need to have a 5-minute break every 20 minutes, that's a great thing. If you need to have a 20-minute break every 5 minutes, well, that's probably not a good idea unless you're having extreme difficulty getting started and unless you're ready to start increasing the amount of time you work. A very strong recommendation is to get your space set up to work before you start the timer. So it's really easy, again, to spend 5 or 10 or 20 minutes making sure you have all your pens in the right place and that your programs are all open and your desk is organized, and suddenly that's an entire Pomodoro work period. Do that first. When you sit down and you start with the Pomodoro technique, you want to make sure that you are focusing specifically on the technique and on the work you have to do, not on all the administration you have to do. A tip that I use a lot is called the 3-element to-do list. And this is especially what I use for students who come in and talk to me and say, I don't have any motivation to do my work. I don't know how to get started. I know I need to do my homework, or I know I need to write that report, but I don't know how to do it. This method says, choose 3 things that you need to do today. It's a short-term thing, and I want you to write them down. You can type it out, and you can have it on your phone, you can text it to someone. It doesn't matter, as long as it's written down something where you can see it. As you finish them, you cross them off, and that's a very motivating thing. You say, I've done this. My entire list is complete. If you're going to add to the list, and you don't have to, add to the list only when it's empty. Now, some pros to this method: 3 things are very much less daunting than everything. You know that you have to write the expense report, and you have to fill out all the payroll, and you have to manage your team, and you have to plan for the next month, and you have to do all those extra things in your job. But today, you're going to be doing the payroll, you're going to be talking to the team in a team meeting, and you're going to be having that spreadsheet open so that you can better understand what you need to do in the next 2 months. And that's it. Yes, you have other things to do, but you want to feel productive. You want that motivation. Now the cons is, well, you have to still choose those 3 things, and sometimes that can be agonizing. Well, which of these 3 things do I have to choose when I have 10 things that are really pushing on me? And also prioritizing. Like we've said before, it's really easy to feel busy and not productive. So if you start choosing things that are irrelevant to your life, and you just fill them off and you're crossing off your list, well, that's not really helping you. Here are some tips for using the 3-element to-do list. The initial list each day should be satisfactory. So what I mean there is, let us say that you're only going to write those 3 things down. You're never going to refill your list in the day. At the end of the day, if you've achieved those 3 things, that must mean you had a productive day. So for instance, I might put in make up a YouTube video as one of my things. I probably wouldn't put in make an instant coffee and sit at my desk. It's a good idea to try to balance work and life. I personally recommend 2 work and 1 play, or if you don't want to think of it as play, 2 things that are boring that you don't want to do but you have to do, and 1 thing that you're really fascinated by and you really, really want to get done. Remember, the 3-element to-do list is all about motivating you to try to get your stuff done. So if you're not motivated to do it because everything you always put on your list is really boring, then it's not going to be an effective method for you. The last one is rewards, and this one is good for some people. And I'll be very, very careful here that if you are the type of person for whom this is effective, then it's going to be very effective. And if you're the type of person for whom this is ineffective, then there's some pretty serious pitfalls and you need to be careful of them. Okay. Some tips that you can use. I want you to try to avoid things like money or food for rewards for everything. So the reason you want to do that is because it's super easy to say, well, if I can finish this one sentence, then I'm going to go and get myself an ice cream, and suddenly you've had 10 ice creams that day and you feel awful. Probably not 10, but you understand what I'm getting at, hopefully. So keep it to something that you might enjoy doing. Maybe if I can work until noon, I'm going to go on a walk for lunch. Reward yourself with something small once per day, medium once per week, and big once per month. So in other words, set up a structure for how your rewards are going to come to you as you progress through your tasks and as you do more things. What you don't want to do is say, well, I'm going to buy myself, I don't know, a new car, for example, or a new video game console after a single day of successful work. That's not how that's going to go. If you are thinking of things like money, well, maybe then you're going to pay yourself each day a particular amount as you save up for something. And if you don't do it, then you don't get to pay into your fund. So if you want to buy something that costs $100 and you're going to pay yourself $5 a day, that means you have to have 20 productive days before you get to that goal. And that's going to allow you to put money aside, which is handy, but also it's going to not just say, well, after the end of one day, I'm going to go and buy this $100 thing, and that's what I'm going to do every single day. So as an example, if I get these 3 things done today, maybe I'm using the 3-element to-do list as well, then I'm going to spend the evening playing video games and I'm going to enjoy it. I got my 3 things done, I'm satisfied with that, so I'm going to take that time for myself. And that's a pretty decent reward. In the next video, let's start talking about medium-term stuff.